Hello and welcome to Ptv World Special. I'm your host Sana MAqbool, and in today's special show we will be talking about 5 top stories that have been really important throughout this week and at the international arena as well. Our first story for the show will be regarding the name-changing spree that the BJP-led Indian government has been going on for a while now, in which a number of cities' names have been changed, which have been deemed too Muslim and have been changed to perhaps appease the Hindu nationalist majority to secure votes for the BJP-led government. These include the name of Allahabad that was earlier changed last month to the name Prayagraj. Also recently, the name of Faizabad has been changed to Ayodhya, and now there has been a discussion of the name of Ahmedabad being also changed to Karnavati. We will be taking a look at exactly what the BJP is trying to do here. Our next story will be regarding the US midterm elections that have been taking place in the United States, in which there has been a major setback for the Trump administration as the Democrats have won the House of Representatives, and we will take a look at exactly how this impacts Trump and his administrative policies, and we'll also be taking a look at exactly what it means in terms of the control that the opposition has now over the policies in America and also in the international arena. Our third story for today will be taking a look at exactly what is fake news, how important and significant is independent journalism, and regarding that we will also be taking a look at the recent testy banter that was witnessed between Trump and a CNN correspondent of the White House, which has been circulating around social media and elsewhere, also with a lot of journalists standing up for the right of freedom of speech and the fact that the president should be open to tough questions. And after that, we will take a look at the Festival of Lights, which is Diwali, that has been celebrated by the Hindus around the world and also, of course, including Pakistan. We will take a look at exactly what Diwali is all about. We have prepared a special report on that as well, and we will take a look at how important it is for Pakistan and everywhere in the world to respect interfaith harmony and to respect different religious festivals of even the minorities of the country. And lastly, but not the least, we will take a look at the IQBAL Day. Of course, it is the 141st birth anniversary of our national poet, Allama Muhammad Iqbal. We have prepared a special package on that as well regarding Iqbal's message to the youth in particular and to the people in general, and what sort of inspiration does that hold for Pakistan and the people and Muslims across the world. So these are the 5 stories that we will be taking a look at in today's show. Regarding the first story in today's show, we have, and of course, the Trump administration and the elections in USA also. We have with us a foreign affairs expert, Sheryar with us in the studios. Thank you very much for joining us in today's show, sir. Of course, as we know that the move to change cities' names in India is not something which is unprecedented. It has happened in the past also, particularly in the UP. We've seen it now happening perhaps in Gujarat also, where they're thinking of changing the name of Ahmedabad to Karnavati. Exactly what really is in a name? What importance or significance does the government seem to hope for when it changes names of these cities?
Well, let me start with a famous saying from a 1984 novel by George Orwell,
right,
where he says that those who control the past control the future, and those who control the present control the past. It means those who control the present, they control the future. And
right.
How? They repaint the history.
Right.
Now, India has a history where there was a Muslim rule as well for almost 1,000 years. And Muslims rulers, they also had, established so many cities. And when they had done that, so they named it, they were either named after them or after, some important person. So,
right.
So they have that kind of an Islamic color with it, that these are the Muslim cities, or they were set up by the Muslims. Now, what they are doing it at the moment, the BJP's policy is, to repaint the history or to undo the history.
In their words, to correct history.
Yeah, they would say that,
Yeah.
but they're changing it, they're belying it, because the evidence is that the cities were, named and they were famous and they're known. So they wanted to correct the history, but they are rewriting the history. And by rewriting the history, what they're doing is that they want to paint the history with their Hindu nationalism.
Right.
That India is somehow has no room or has no history of a Muslim rule as well, or it has a Muslim heritage as well. Now, India was a crucible. It was of civilization. It had Hindu, Jains, Buddhism, Islam, and so many other cultures and religions. But the BJP's policy or its whole vision is based on Hindu nationalism. And we see the rise of Hindu nationalism with the politics of the BJP. It serves them politically, and that's why they are doing it. So when these are not just symbolic things, they have a far greater impact. Imagine a generation after, a new generation after, let's say, 20 or 25 years, they won't know the history that of the cities, that there were Muslim ruler once and they had started these cities. So it's like deleting from the collective memory of the whole nation their past. And the reason is their Hindutva, their Indian, their Hindu nationalism. Now, if you look at India, India was so far called a secular state, inclusive state, whether it was or not.
Which is quite astonishing, of course, that it has been able to retain that label. We will continue our discussion on this topic, a short break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. We were discussing the BJP government stance on changing Indian cities, and they're saying the fact that this is because they are trying to restore the identity that the cities originally had. A lot of political strategists, however, Mr. Sheryar, are looking at this as a move with respect to the upcoming elections, and for them to appease and gain votes that they did earlier, particularly in the UP, also trying to repeat the election victory that they had, and we've seen them building statues. We've seen them talking about the identity of Lord Ram, especially when Faizabad was changed to Ayodhya. That is what they initially talked about, that the name would be, Faizabad was a name that was a symbol of their slavery under the Muslim rulers, and they want to restore the identity to Ayodhya. But really, is that the objective?
Well, yeah, in a way, because if you look at their policies, it's based on populism, but populism which is based or which derives from Hindu nationalism. So it's not like they are creating this new kind of ideology in India, and it's divisive. It divides India between Hindu majority, between Hindu majority and the minority, different minorities, and its only aim is to gain electoral victory, because when they divide the nation over religion, Hindu are in majority, and if they can instill this nationalism or Hindu nationalism in people by all these symbols, by all these policies of raising statues, rewriting the histories, so they're creating a new kind of a politics, a new kind of ideology which is based on nationalism. And if you look at the populist movements in the world, for instance, if you look at the Nazis Germany, so they created their own populism based on Nazism, based on Aryan nationalism.
Right.
And it was also divisive. Divisive policies are always done by the populists when they don't have any political vision, real political vision. For instance, if you want to run a country, you should have a political policy or political theory which you follow and according to which you want to carry the country.
Of course, and that is one of the criticism that they're facing, the fact that they're just trying to change names or building statues or building temples, and in fact the situation of the city or the state remains the same. The actual infrastructure or the development that they need to work on doesn't change. Even the Congress leaders have expressed criticism that there is no real change in UP or in Faizabad, for that matter, and in fact, it's just a name of a change. So do you think the voters will actually look into fact that the policies don't really trickle down into any real benefit for them?
Well, the problem with the populism is this: it remains on the slogans. It depoliticizes the society. I call it depoliticization of society, because then society, they don't think about the real issues, what they need, what are their requirements, what kind of lifestyle they want to have, what development they need. So it depoliticizes them, and then they are a squabble over things which are not really important for the common good of the people. And the Hindu nationalism is one such thing. For instance, if they can restore all these things, what benefit it can give to the people, to the common people. So ultimately, well, the divisive politics sometimes works. That's why BJP won.
Votes, though.
It might get, and it may not. If it depends on the maturity of the people, it also depends on the opposition parties there, how they convince their people that these policies are not going to help them. So a lot depends on the opposition there and the maturity of the voters. If they reject this idea, majority of them, then probably the BJP then can realize that only Hindu nationalism cannot work when it comes to politics.
Right. Do you also think that this could harm India's image as a secular state when they're changing names to obviously Hindu ones, or changing names of Muslim states that have been there, or the identity that has been there dating 500 years back, which is the history of the subcontinent or India in general? And the fact that there is, of course, a large Muslim minority there, right? Do you not think that this also impacts them in terms of this seen as a way of humiliating them or not taking their rights into account? How will that play out for India at the international level?
Well, at the international, if you look at it, it has already tarnished India's image, because India's image is a secular democracy. But with the rise of the nationalism, the world is watching it, and we have seen incidents of vigilantism, which I call terrorism. So the vigilantism, we see that the mob violence we have seen against the minorities, against the Muslims, and it's taking place, and then it's shared on the social media, and the whole world is watching it. So India's image as a secular country, it has fast degraded, and the world is now look at it with concern and look at it as a backward country, or the country which is going back and not progressing. So internationally, it is seen with concerns. Nationalism, Hindu nationalism, or any religious kind of a nationalism, it's not accepted worldwide. It's looked down upon worldwide, and that has already been the concern of the world. The second thing is domestic impact on this. Yes, the Muslims have suffered. You have seen the videos that Muslims are thrown to the mob violence, and there is nobody to stop it. And this hatred is created because of that divisive politics, because now the mob are, the BJP guys and other RSS, they know that, the government is on their side, and they have to create that hatred. This us versus them division between the people. It creates a kind of a nationhood, that they hate the Muslims,
but that
others.
Could also backfire. That could also backfire in terms of communal rights or violent protest. Specifically, there has been demands in Ayodhya also that they want to build a temple with tributes to Lord Ram at a place which is very contested. It's under court rule at the moment, where back in 1992 there were a lot of riots because a Muslim mosque was demolished there. So moves like these, do you think that this could actually backfire for the BJP government if things go out of hand, if there is mob violence or communal rights in the country?
Of course, it also depends on how the minorities react to it, what kind of a politics they want to pursue. I believe at the moment they are doing it, in a civilized political manner, supporting, those parties, who raise the rights of the Muslims and other communities. So this is one way of doing it, protesting it. The other way is, if that doesn't work, probably then it can lead to some kind of violence as well, because when there are political grievances, ultimately then people can go towards violence, for their rights. When they exhaust all the other democratic and political means, so it can backfire in the long run. But at the moment, BJP believes that it's working because they have created this mantra of Hindu nationalism, and they have divided. They're trying to divide the whole country based on religion. So Hindus are in majority, and they expect that they will vote for them again and re-elect them.
Right. Okay. We're going to have to move on to our next topic. That is the discussion on the midterm elections that have been held in the United States. In the aftermath of the election so far, we've seen that Donald Trump and his White House faces a major electoral setback, of course, because the Democrats took control of the House of Representatives, and this could have serious repercussions for the Trump administration, since the newly empowered opposition could investigate issues including Trump's own finances, allegations of corruption, and of course collusion with Russia. All these can be affected quite majorly by the fact that the Democrats have won the House of Representatives. We'll discuss exactly what significance does this hold for Trump at the domestic level, and also at the level of foreign policy for the United States. Now, we know that the Democrats have won power at the House of Representatives, but what does that really mean? What sort of power can the opposition now actually utilize to affect Donald Trump's policies? Initially, President Donald Trump is used to a very easy Congress, a Congress that has been able to support his words or deeds. Now, do you think he will face problems?
Well, if you look at the midterm, some in the United States have dubbed it as a referendum on Donald Trump.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's the reason it's called referendum is this, because Donald Trump has become so much a controversial figure in the United States, even before election and after elections. He's a controversial one. And if you look at the votes, he has not got, Hillary Clinton had got more votes than her. So because of the electoral college system, he won it. So it means that it's a kind of a 50-50 for him.
There's a divide, of course.
And there was, his policies were also, if you look at the press, was not unpopular. It doesn't mean it was quite unpopular. He had his support base and they supported him.
Right.
Now, this election would have proved that whether if people believed in him, if they believed in his policies, so Republicans might have won it. And this elections proved that in a Congress that when the Democrats regained control of the House, that probably, a lot of states that Republicans had in control in the past, they lost it to the Democrats. And a lot of women also voted. That became, one of the, basic factor of, loss for Republicans, because women were, a lot of women were against, the Republican policies, and they voted for Democrats. And then made a huge change, and we saw the change in the results, and now we see Democrats controlling the Congress. And when they control the Congress, of course, the United States president will not have, a free, walk over policies.
Right. We were talking in detail regarding this also. We have been joined online by Niaz Murtaza, who is an analyst. Thank you very much for joining us on PTV World Special. We were talking about the midterm elections and the impact it has for Trump. Can you give us your views on how significant this is? And how significantly do you think it will impact Trump's moves in the future?
Well, it was a mixed night. Both parties got something out of it. So the Democrats were able to recapture the House back after 8 years. But Trump's party, the Republican Party, still managed to, hold on to the Senate and, in fact, expanded its control there with 2 or 3 additional seats. So it basically means, that, the situation of gridlock that we have so often with the presidency with one party and at least one of the houses of the Congress with another party, that situation is going to come back. For the last 2 years, we've had the situation where Republicans were, basically in charge of all 3 places. But now at least, Democrats have a foothold, so they will be able to checkmate some of the policies of Trump in terms of, budget, in terms of immigration, and so on. But it still shows that, Trump, despite all his racism and, negativism, he's still popular among a very large swath of voters in the U.S. And all this, sets up a very interesting election in 2020 when Trump himself is on the ballot.
Right. Do you think that the Democrats will move for impeachment of the president? They have a simple majority, and for the first move towards impeachment, that's all it takes?
Well, yeah, but, they have to have something substantial to make that a base, because remember, the House initiates the impeachment, but then it goes to the Senate, where to finally actually undertake the impeachment, a 2/3 majority is required in the Senate. And, so the Republicans still hold on to the Senate. So it's an unlikely event. So, the Democrats would not like to, even broach that subject unless they have something very tangible from some of these investigations that are going on against Trump, because otherwise it can backfire on them. His supporters, even independents, would see it as a witch hunt. Instead of focusing on the real issues of America, they would say they're just going after, Trump. So they'll have to be very, very careful, and, the initiative will have to come from some of the investigations that are going on against him.
Right, thank you very much for joining us, Niaz Murtaza, speaking to us regarding the elections in USA. Mr. Sheryar, if impeachment is not something that the Democrats will immediately go for, what about the investigation into the allegations of corruption or Trump's finances, or even perhaps the effect of all of this on the Mueller investigation?
Well, yeah, of course, so with the Democrats controlling the Congress, they can initiate all these allegations against Trump, and that's why he may be a bit in trouble
right.
because of that. But I believe, as a whole, for the United States, it's a good outcome, because when you control all the three houses, the presidency, Congress, and Senate, then there is a tendency toward authoritarianism. There is right. nobody to check on the powers of the president or of a party. Now Democrats are in one house, so they can check on their policies regarding so many things, and that will keep a balance in the United States and in the United States politics. And there was this fear that United States is sliding towards authoritarianism, and its democracy is being compromised. Now that can be checkmate.
What about Trump's ability to issue executive orders?
Well, as a president, executive orders can always be done, but in certain cases, it has to be referred then to the Congress, and Congress can, of course, it's like veto. Congress can right. have a veto on the things.
Right. So basically, the impact that this has is that Trump will be able to perhaps do what he wishes, but it won't be as easy as it was in the past. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Sheryar, and discussing two really important issues with us. We will be moving on with more discussions, of course, the rest of our stories, fake news, DIWALI, and of course, IQBAL Day will be mentioned after the short break. Stay tuned.
Passion for polo will be the highest on the world's highest polo ground. Shandur invites visitors to experience a traditional polo tournament between the teams of Chitral and Gilgit. The tournament is held on Shandur Pass, the highest polo ground in the world, at 3,700 meters above sea level. The first time a polo tournament took place on the Shandur Pass was in 1936. It is a place unique and exotic in itself, surrounded by some of the most spectacular mountain scenery in the world. The event marks the annual rivalry between the teams of Chitral and Gilgit.
Welcome back to Ptv World's special. In a stunning break from protocol, the White House has suspended the press pass of CNN's representative Jim ACOSTA, and President Donald Trump called him a terrible, rude person. Let's see why.
Your campaign had an ad showing migrants climbing over walls and so on.
Well, that's true.
But
they weren't actors.
They're not going to be doing that.
They weren't actors. Well, no, it's true. Do you think they were actors? They weren't actors. They didn't come from Hollywood. These were people. This was an actual, it happened a few days ago. And
They're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of
you know
miles
what?
away.
I
That's
think
not an
you
invasion.
should, honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings
Let
would
me
be
ask,
much
if
better.
I may
Okay,
ask
that's
one other
enough.
question, Mr. President, if I may ask
Peter,
one
go
other
ahead.
question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's
Mr.
enough.
President,
That's
I was
enough.
going to ask one of the other folks.
That's
have had,
enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr.
Excuse
President,
me. That's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other
Peter,
question,
let's
if
go.
I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have
I'm not concerned
indictments-
about anything with
that you
the
may have
Russian
indictments coming down?
investigation because it's a hoax.
Are you-
That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible. And the way you treat other people are horrible. You shouldn't treat people that way. Go ahead.
Well, that was a testy exchange indeed between the president and Jim Acosta. CNN has said that it stands by its reporter, while the White House has accused Jim Acosta of placing his hands on the intern in the White House to try to take the mic away from him. To talk more regarding this incident, we have been joined by Asad Beg, who is Director Media Matters for Democracy. Thank you very much for joining us in today's PTV World Special. Of course, Donald Trump's stance on media and fake news has been controversial, and he has always talked about CNN and other broadcasters of broadcasting news, which is not true. But of course, when you see this banter, you see that journalism, independent journalism, is at stake. How do you look at this?
Frankly speaking, this is really disappointing. And I'm sure you just showed one part of the video, because if you see the longer video, then you'll understand people who were present, journalists who are present in that meeting, journalists who cannot speak English in an American accent. President Trump is perhaps very sort of discouraging. The attitude towards them was very discouraging. Often he said, just I cannot understand your question, just because he could not understand the accent, which is really strange to me, by the way. And also, you know, being the president of the United States of America, the country that we so lovingly call the leader of the free world, and then the president, displaying this sort of attitude towards the media and journalists, and then propagating this idea of fake news. And by the way, you know, misinformation online is a huge concern, and regardless of the fact that we keep seeing this misinformation online in Pakistan and so on, regardless of the fact, you simply cannot label a television channel as fake news because you do not like the reporting. Many times, President Trump has said this CNN is fake news. What kind of precedent are you setting for other countries? And we have seen examples of other, South Asian countries even, and other countries following suit, where there is this, discouragement towards the journalism media. And this to me is really strange, frankly speaking. Let me also add one thing here, that the CPJ, the Committee to Protect Journalists, has also declared the United States of America as one of the most dangerous countries in 2018. And this to me is shocking.
Of course, we also see, with regards to this incident in the aftermath, we see that Peter Beg, who also came under fire at that press conference, saying that he's been working in the White House since 1996, and this is unprecedented that a press pass has been removed by the correspondent. And he said that the president should be able to answer tough questions. Is it not the journalist's right and, in fact, the obligation to ask tough questions from the president or any other senior official?
Obviously, you're in a position which is considered the most powerful position in the world. The least you can do is be answerable to public, and not just that. Forget answering or forget a response. What you're doing is actually, in a way, inciting violence against a journalist. Because what you have to remember that Trump has a following in millions, right? So if this is the attitude of the President Trump in the White House, then can you imagine that what other Republican followers of President Trump will do to journalists in their real life on the streets, for instance? We have seen this kind of attitude playing on the streets of the United States of America generally, and this is really crazy. One thing that I keep saying to everybody, the reason we are concerned about this is that this is not in isolation. This attitude is not in isolation. We've seen this attitude being replicated in Pakistan, India, and various other South Asian countries. And this to me is really, really disturbing. That the countries that we look towards for a president, for setting a precedent, for an example setting for other countries, they kind of their behavior towards journalism and media is as such. And this, to me, frankly speaking, is really disturbing.
Right, of course, this is not a problem that is limited to the US. As you said, it is a problem that we see within our country also and elsewhere in the world also. But fake news is a term that wasn't so common perhaps 2 years back, and it is one of Donald Trump's favorite. But exactly what it stands for or how can it be recognized is something which hasn't been really looked into.
Look, first off, let me very clearly say this for your viewers as well, that the term fake news is extremely problematic. Globally, since after President Trump started using this term, fake news, this term is basically used to target credible media outlets and journalists. Like we've seen in US, for instance, for Trump, CNN is fake news, right? And so fake news in itself now has become a term which is used by many to discredit journalists and discredit media around the world. So that's perhaps not the right term that we want to use. However, we call it misinformation and disinformation, which are really big issues. Now, the problem is that when the governments start assessing what exactly is misinformation, then there is also a chance that anything that they don't like, any reporting that they don't like we've seen in the case of President Trump, or any questions that they don't like, such as we've seen in the White House, suddenly becomes fake news because you don't like it and you are a person in power. So this term and the use of this term, especially by the President of the United States of America, has really been problematic. So there is this one part. The other part of misinformation online is that the World Economic Forum has actually categorized misinformation online as one of the biggest threats to the humankind. I'm not talking about a nation. I'm not talking about a creed or a certain ethnicity of people. I'm talking about the humankind. That's what the World Economic Forum has said. And the other major threats that they were talking about were nuclear and the global warming and this sort of thing they have put in the same category as the misinformation online. So I think they've been very clear on what kind of dangers we see in terms of people believing on rumors and then acting upon it. However, I think this environment, in this kind of environment, people like President Trump, who are in position of power, should be really, really careful in terming any media outlet or journalist as fake news, because then it's a slippery slope. There is no stopping this thing.
Right, and when we're speaking about misinformation, we also see that while President Donald Trump is accusing broadcasters of publishing fake news, we also see that the White House, in the aftermath of this particular incident with Jim Acosta, has issued a video which has been doctored to represent something which is different from reality, baselessly accusing the reporter of placing his hand or coming in contact with the intern at the White House. Is that also not the responsibility of the White House to represent news which is true and not just that which goes in the favor, and of course for all other governments as well?
Look, I think this was really offensive. This video that they have posted is very offensive, at least to me as a person who has been a journalist and currently also working in the news media. If you see the video very carefully, the intern is trying to grab the mic from the reporter who's asking questions, and he's using one hand to stop it from happening. So he's grabbing the mic from one hand and then using another to stop the arm of the intern, which is clearly where she's clearly trying to grab the mic from him. Now, if this is seen as some form of attack on a woman, then I don't know how to frankly speaking interpret the situation. But I think one thing was very, very clear, that the reporter was being discouraged from asking questions. The reporter was also, very subtly being threatened by the very person who has to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America, the president. And frankly speaking, this was a situation where it was very painfully clear that the president himself was trying to wiggle out and kind of act as an offensive instead of defensive on the reporter, on the journalist who was present there. And frankly speaking, this to me is an insult. As a journalist, if I look at it, this to me is an insult. Also, I think what Trump was, and this is something that others have said to me as well, I think what President Trump was trying to do was to play on the Me Too campaign. And because suddenly, people like Trump are, think it's perfectly all right to say whatever they want to say, and then just sort of link it with an attack on a woman, which clearly this was not the case.
Final question, Mr. Asad, if you can just briefly tell us exactly what can we do to basically help independent journalism and journalists worldwide? What needs to be done?
I think this is a very loaded question, but for policymakers, we should start from being a little more encouraging in terms of news. Because look, what exactly is the job of news and journalism? The job of the news and journalism is to actually act in parallel with other pillars of the state and perform a certain amount of accountability and monitoring on these other pillars. So it's a job that we do as journalists. It's our job. It's not that we are doing this in spite or perhaps to favor one political party or to discourage another. This is what we do. This is a job of the journalist and the news media.
Right.
This, I think,
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Asad, for joining us and speaking to us regarding the very important issue of fake news and, of course, independent journalism, which is a threat not just in the United States but worldwide. Moving on to a lighter note and to the Festival of Lights, Diwali, which has been celebrating around the world in these days, starting from the 6th of November. It is usually celebrated for 5 days, and it's been done so everywhere in the world where Hindus are present, and of course in Pakistan as well. What is Diwali all about? Let's take a look in this report.
Diwali, popularly associated as the Festival of Lights, is one of the most celebrated occasions by Hindus. It is observed in the autumn season. The significance of the festival is the victory of light over darkness, good over evil, knowledge over ignorance, and hope over despair. The preparations for the festival begins days in advance, and people are decorating their homes and offices with diyas, lights, candles, and much more. Gifts and sweets are wrapped and kept for the occasions. Homes are lit up, streets and shops are full of goodies. Over the period of 5 days, people visit their friends, family, relatives, and exchange gifts and greetings. In Pakistan, the Hindu residents of northern Sindh are concluding arrangement for the 3-day Diwali festival. The Pandits and devotees are holding prayers in different temples for integrity, solidarity, and security of the country.
Of course, that was the Festival of Lights, Diwali, which is being celebrated around the world by Hindus and also in Pakistan. We've seen the Prime Minister also tweeting and felicitating the Hindu community along with the President on this occasion at the Festival of Lights, which of course is extremely important since Pakistan is a country not just for the Muslims or the Hindus or the Christians, but for each and every minority and person living in the country, since of course they are citizens of the country. And so all religious festivals and all such occasions and festivities are important, not just for the people who are celebrating it, but for the community in general and the nation in general, which is why, of course, we see moves like the Sindh government giving a day off to all the Hindu employees on this particular festival. And last but not the least, of course, it is IQBAL Day today, the 141st birth anniversary of our great national poet. What exactly was IQBAL's message? Let's take a look.
Born on November 9, 1877 in Sialkot, Allama Iqbal's ancestors hailed from Kashmir. He was a great poet, thinker, philosopher, statesman, teacher, lawyer of a distinguished quality. His intellectual ability and performance was not just meant for finding solution of any one particular group, for the whole humanity, especially for Muslims. He was a scholar par excellence who spoke his heart and mind through his poetry, lectures, and philosophical writings. He was also a well-known politician who in British India was widely regarded as having inspired the Pakistan movement. He is called the spiritual father of Pakistan. He is considered as one of the most important figures in Urdu literature, with literary work in both Urdu and Persian. He was very much concerned about the youth. He encouraged them to reach the height of glories and great success. Referred to the youth with the name of Shaheen, that is, those who can pull down the stars to themselves. Iqbal says, "Muhabbat mujhe un nौजवानों से है, सितारों पे डालते हैं जो कमंड." Iqbal is a poet of hope and courage. He, in his poetic verses, laid stress upon never losing hope and to always be courageous. He used poetry as a vehicle to deliver his message and to awaken the consciousness of the Muslims. As he saw the dream of Pakistan, he also laid stress upon getting education and knowledge and applying the same in everyday life that helps one to understand reality and get oneself enlightened. In 1920, after the publication of Asrar-e-Khudi, The Secret of the Self, the name and fame of Dr. Iqbal was carried over to Europe, and his philosophic genius and poetic talent were recognized by the British government. The honor of knighthood was conferred on Iqbal by British government in 1922. His other famous books include Bale-Jibril, Zarb-e-Misr and Bang-e-Dra. Anam Shehzad, PTV World News.
That was Iqbal's message, who was a visionary for all generations and of course a great inspiration for Pakistan movement and beyond, and in particular for the youth and Muslims and the youth of all, of course, all our cities and this country as well, who he called the Shaheen, who are of course there to help and improve the situation, which is much relevant today than it was before, also considering the situations in various Muslim countries of the world. Today's show, of course, covered many different topics. We started off with India and the BJP-led government changing names of cities it deemed too Islamic to Hindu ones, and of course trying to cover it up by saying that it is to restore identity or to correct history in their own words, when in fact it may just be to appease the Hindu nationalist majority and get votes. Then we took a look at the Trump administration and the midterm elections in the US and its impact on Trump's policy, particularly at the domestic level and of course at the international arena as well. After that, we talked about fake news and the importance of independent journalism with regard to Trump's testy exchange with Jim ACOSTA of CNN. And then, of course, we took a look at the Festival of Lights Diwali, which is still being celebrated and will conclude tomorrow. And, of course, we remembered our national poet Iqbal on his 141st birth anniversary today. That's all from PTV World Special. Keep watching PTV World. Thanks for watching.